The Galactic Council had made it abundantly clear. Humans were not to be trusted with childcare duties. Their species was too new, too unpredictable, too prone to what the Vrinthian ambassador had termed catastrophic improvisation. Mira Talon had listened to these warnings with the polite smile she'd perfected over 3 years of diplomatic service, then promptly ignored every single one. The Dragon Cubs had been abandoned on Station Meridian 7, after a cargo mishap left their transport ship critically damaged. 8 juvenile Dracari, each no larger than a terrier, with scales that shimmered between copper and gold, and eyes that held an unsettling amount of intelligence for creatures who couldn't yet breathe fire. The station's xenobiologist had taken one look at their needle-sharp teeth and promptly resigned. The Select Counselor had declared them a liability to station harmony. Even the Karathi engineer who'd once hand-raised a colony of plasmavorms had refused. "They're not pets," Myra had said, watching the cubs tumble over each other in the quarantine bay. "They're people. Small, confused people who just lost everything." The station commander had given her exactly 14 hours to prove she could handle them before calling Dracari Child Services, a process that would take 6 weeks and involve paperwork in 3 languages, none of which used recognizable alphabets. That was 4 days ago. Mira sat on the floor of her expanded quarters, surrounded by what could only be described as organized chaos. The Dragon Cubs had taken to human habitation with the enthusiasm of explorers discovering a new world, which she supposed they were. Kivik, the smallest and boldest of the group, had become her shadow. He was currently attempting to climb into her lap, his tiny claws catching on her uniform pants with pinprick accuracy. His siblings were engaged in various activities. 2 were systematically investigating the contents of her footlocker. 1 was attempting to eat a datapad, and another trio had discovered the joys of her bedsheets and were building what appeared to be a nest. "No, not food," Myra said, gently extracting the datapad from between sharp teeth. The cub chirped indignantly, a sound somewhere between a bird's whistle and metal scraping stone. Kivik's head tilted, watching her every movement with those unervingly intelligent eyes. His tail, thin and whip-like, coiled around her wrist. It was during breakfast, or what passed for breakfast, when feeding 8 carnivorous reptiles, that the incident occurred. Myra had been pulling on her boots, the standard-issue magnetic sole footwear required for station maintenance shifts, when she noticed Kivik watching with rapt attention. His head swiveled, following the motion of her hands as she slipped her foot into the boot, pulled the laces tight, and secured the magnetic seal. She thought nothing of it. 2 hours later, she returned from her shift to find absolute pandemonium. Kivik had somehow accessed her storage locker. She'd deal with the security implications later, and distributed her entire collection of footwear among his siblings. 8 dragon cubs, each with a boot or shoe, were struggling with profound determination to figure out the mystery of human foot coverings. The problem was immediately apparent. They'd all inserted their feet through the top of the boots, leaving their legs sticking straight up while they tried to walk on the hard sole. 1 cub was stuck upside down, having tipped over and unable to right himself. Another had given up walking entirely and was dragging herself forward with her front claws, her hind legs jutting skyward in fuzzy purple socks. A third had managed to wedge both back feet into a single hiking boot and was hopping in circles, clearly distressed but unwilling to admit defeat. Kivik himself had commandeered her favorite running shoes, 1 on each foot, naturally, and was wobbling across the floor like a drunk trying to navigate an ice rink. His wings, still too small for flight, flared out for balance as he took another determined step, promptly fell over, chirped in frustration, and started again. For a long moment, Myra could only stare. Then she started laughing. Not the polite chuckle of diplomatic functions, but the full body, tears streaming down her face laughter of someone confronted with the absurd. She laughed until her sides ached, until she had to sit down on the floor, until Kivik wobbled over to her with a confused trill and bonked his shoe-encased foot against her knee. "Oh, you sweet, ridiculous creatures," she gasped, wiping her eyes. That's not how shoes work," Kivik chirped, clearly offended by her amusement. Okay. Let me show you." She carefully extracted Kivik's feet from her running shoes, noting how his claws had left tiny punctures in the mesh. His siblings gathered around, watching with the intensity of scholars observing a critical experiment. "See, the foot goes in here," Myra explained, demonstrating slowly. "The opening is at the top. Your claws come out here, at the front. And then, She pulled the laces snug. You, tighten it so it stays on. 8 pairs of reptilian eyes watched in fascination. Then Kivik did something that made her breath catch. He picked up the shoe with his front claws, turned it right side up, and carefully placed his back foot into the opening correctly. It didn't fit, of course. His claws were too long, his foot structure entirely wrong. But he'd understood. He'd watched, learned, and adapted. The Galactic Council's words echoed in her mind. Too new, too unpredictable, too prone to catastrophic improvisation. Maybe that was exactly what these cubs needed. You know what? Myra said, reaching for her tablet to send a message to the station commander. I think you all just earned yourselves a human guardian. At least until your people can collect you. And maybe, she watched Kivik attempt the shoe again, his determination unwavering. Maybe we'll all learn something from each other. The council could file whatever complaints they wanted. Humanity had just proven something important. They didn't need permission to care for others. They just needed to show up, laugh at the chaos, and teach small dragons how to wear shoes. Even if those dragons would never, technically, need them.